Hello, I'm Juliet Mann, and this is the Agenda podcast, CGTN Europe's one-stop shop for smart, in-depth discussion of the issues that really matter in the world today. The summer blockbuster season is now well underway, with millions around the world heading to the movies. This year, the summer global box office is expected to hit around $12.4 billion, which would be near a post-COVID record. China's box office revenue alone for the year so far has reached $4 billion, largely down to the extraordinary success of one film, Ne Zha 2. The Chinese fantasy adventure animation sequel has broken all kinds of records since its release at the end of January. It's the highest grossing animated film ever. It's also the first non-English language film to surpass $2 billion in worldwide gross. And it's the first film ever to take over $1 billion in a single market, breaking the record set by Star Wars: The Force Awakens in the US. So, does this mark a true breakthrough in international cinema? For all their domestic clout, Chinese films like Ne Zha 2 have yet to wow audiences worldwide. The 10 highest-grossing movies in the world last year were all released by the US. But with an English dub of the film just announced for the end of the summer, featuring Oscar winner Michelle Yeoh, the battle for the international box office in 2025 certainly isn't over. Joining me now is film critic and box office expert Charles Gant. Thanks for coming on the agenda. Now, unlike some other industries, Charles, cinemas haven't quite recovered to pre-pandemic levels, have they? Why is that?
Well, there's quite a few different theories about that. I think one would be that audiences got used to watching films in their own homes during the pandemic, and increasingly we all have these fantastic home entertainment systems. So that is definitely a one theory. Another, cinema operators themselves would point to the big reduction in the theatrical window. The theatrical window is the exclusive period when films are only available in cinemas and not in the home. And that used to be a significant period before the pandemic, and film studios and distributors sort of took advantage of the very weak position cinemas found themselves in after the pandemic to scrunch that window down. So cinema operators think the window's too short. Audiences think the film's coming in their homes any minute now. Why go to the cinema? And then also there's been a bit of lack of investment in cinema. A number of the big cinema chains have been found themselves over-leveraged, in debt, owing landlords money. They haven't been spending the money, upkeeping their cinemas in the way they need to. Running a cinema, you have to run to stand still. And then finally, there were Hollywood strikes a couple of years ago, which really interrupted the supply and it stalled the recovery.
So do you think any of those things are permanent? You're talking about that theatrical window, you're talking about the rise of streaming and stay-at-home viewing, but that big one, investment.
Well, I think investment is a piece that is being solved. There are, and cinemas are now in a better fight. They've renegotiated their exposure to debts. They've done better deals with landlords to try and get rents down. And they're now beginning to spend. I think what we're going to see is probably we'll land in a different place. We'll see perhaps audiences will be a bit lower, but they might be spending more money on premium offerings, whether that's premium format screens and audio, IMAX, Dolby Vision, Dolby Atmos, that kind of thing, or that more boutique environment, which we're seeing increasingly in cinemas. So I think we might end up with a higher sort of average ticket spend, lower admissions. Hopefully, gradually, we will claw back all the box office, and get back to where we were before the pandemic.
Charles, this year's biggest blockbuster is a film that many in the West won't have heard of. Ne Zha 2 spent 5 months in cinemas in China, grossing over $2.2 billion. That makes it the 5th highest grossing film of all time worldwide and puts it up there with Avatar and the Avengers. But only a tiny fraction of that came from international cinema goers. What do you think that says about the global box office sales?
Well, one thing it says is the incredible power and potential of the Chinese market in cinema. Chinese population estimated at 1.4 billion people. I mean, there is no other market in the world, and certainly not including the United States, where you can gross $2 billion on a movie in one country. So China is in a unique position there. I mean, there are other, there is another very populous nation, India, but you can't gross $2 billion for a Bollywood film in India. It's just not possible. So that puts China in a very, very sort of unusual position where it doesn't really, I mean, Ne Zha 2 played around the world and it did some it did some decent international sales, but it was driven by the Chinese domestic box office. And it just showed the astonishing potential of a Chinese film in its home market.
And then the astonishing potential of China's domestic film-going market. How important is that to Hollywood?
Well, to Hollywood, well, it used to be very important. And if you look before the pandemic, you'll see, there were 2019, 9 Hollywood films grossed over $100 million in 2019 in China. And one of those films, Avengers Endgame, grossed more than $600 million. We are no longer in that place. So Hollywood films, for reasons that are perhaps quite complicated, are just not succeeding at that level. The biggest grossing film in China, Hollywood film this year in China is Mission Impossible 8. But no film has yet grossed $100 million in China. Having said that, China is still an important international market. And we're speaking at the moment, Jurassic World Rebirth is in cinemas, F1, the movie, is in cinemas. Those are the 2 biggest global hits as we're recording this. And China is the top market outside of North America. It's the top international market for both those films. So China is important, but it's just not delivering the box office for Hollywood films, Hollywood studio films, that it was delivering before the pandemic.
But it's not an industry that hasn't been touched by Trump's tariff. Donald Trump has threatened to weigh into the film world, threatening 100% tariffs on films made outside the United States. And China's, in response, has said it might limit the number of foreign films that end up getting released there. I mean, how do you think that might affect the box office and the film world more broadly?
Well, that would be a big headache for Hollywood studios because currently as I mentioned, the top films on release, Jurassic World Rebirth, F1 the movie, the top international market is China. However, it wouldn't be the existential threat that it would have seemed to be if in the kind of pre-pandemic age where Hollywood blockbusters were grossing hundreds of millions of dollars in China. So it would be definitely very unwelcome to the Hollywood studios, and it would be a big headache. But it wouldn't have the impact that it would have had a number of years ago. And the real impact would be felt elsewhere. So it would be felt in countries like the United Kingdom, where a lot of Hollywood production takes place. And Hollywood studios would have to stop making films, which they can now do more cheaply abroad, and they'd have to try and bring production home. These particular set of tariffs is aimed at foreign production of Hollywood films. That's what it's really about. But it remains to be seen whether it will happen. I mean, the Hollywood studios don't want it to happen because that's going to make it more expensive for them to make their films. And of course, it would be disastrous for production hubs in places like the UK. Yeah. So watch this space.
I want to talk a little bit more about the streaming giants who've really changed the film market as we know it, having had a huge impact. I mean, for the likes of Apple, Netflix and Amazon, box office revenue isn't that important, is it?
I would take us through a little bit with you on that. I think it really is a case by case. I would agree with you totally about Netflix. Netflix does not care about theatrical box office. Netflix releases films in cinemas pretty much for one reason only, and that is to qualify them for consideration by Oscar voters and the BAFTA Film Awards in the UK. So they need to release those films that are in contention for awards. Apple takes a very different view. Apple actually believes that their content on their feature film content on their platform is elevated by having succeeded in cinemas. So, Ridley Scott's Napoleon, Martin Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon, and currently Joseph Kosinski's Formula One F1 the movie. I mean, F1 the movie is going to be probably get to $400 million maybe. I mean, as we're speaking, it's pushing 300 million. So yeah, I mean, they are definitely interested in making their films succeed at the cinema and then present them on their platform. Amazon is sort of in the middle, but Amazon MGM Studios, they're going to be releasing the next Bond film. They're going to be doing the theatrical release themselves. They're gearing up for that. They're making hires. They're building teams. So I think that for certain Amazon releases, they will be chasing a theatrical play as well.
What about what audiences want and how that might differ from region to region? I mean, superhero sequels and franchises, that they tend to do pretty well everywhere. But do you think maybe global audiences are getting a bit tired of sequels, of remakes, of the same type of content?
Well, film critics would love that to be true. But it is questionable whether it is true. I attended the Cine Europe trade convention in Barcelona, where the head of Disney's global distribution was saying, we all want to make original films. The fact remains, the top 15 films at the North American box office last year were all sequels, franchise films, and films based on existing IP, intellectual property. So we absolutely want it to be the case that original stories flourish. The biggest films of the year so far are Lilo and Stitch, which is a remake of a Disney animated film, a Minecraft movie, which is based on a video game, and it's going to be Jurassic World Rebirth, which is going to get up to the sort of similar level, which is the 7th film in the Jurassic franchise. So I do think the shine is off when it comes to Marvel, because they had a couple of Marvel films already this year. Thunderbolts was well received by critics. Audiences who saw it liked it. But the box office it's achieved globally, it's just not at the level of past Marvel hits. So there's definitely fatigue for superhero films. Warner Brothers have got Superman out this summer. We'll see how that does. And Marvel have got Fantastic Four First Steps, which is, I think, a lot of confidence on that film.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, we do have some original films succeeding. So Ryan Coogler's Sinners, which is an original film, has been an astonishing success, driven by North America, to be fair. But for an original film, it has done very well. And then we have F1 the movie, which qualifies as original, although of course it is capitalizing on the existing enthusiasm globally for Formula One motor racing.
Now, the movie business is notorious for needing to have very deep pockets, but I wonder if you think it's all getting a bit too expensive. I mean, the final instalment of Mission Impossible topped the box office around the world, including in China, but at a reported cost of over $400 million just to make it, and before marketing and all of the rest of it is taken into account, it's likely to lose money, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the economics are on that film, but because global cinema box office is not the whole story. It will have lots of revenue down the line on home platforms. But certainly the production budget number on that film looks insane. I don't know how they let it get so high, and that is going to make it a very tough road to be profitable. Similarly, F1 the movie cost like $250 million, so that's also going to make it tough to make its money back. Although Apple, a well-resourced company, they probably don't care so much. But Hollywood would love to get these costs down, for sure. And it will be interesting to see if they can do that, whether they can use AI, for example, a lot more in a lot of the post-production that sucks up these budgets, and what the consequences for that will be, because there will be a lot of pushback on that from craft unions. You can see potential for more strikes on their way. So that is going to be a very rocky road for Hollywood studios, trying to get these runaway costs down on their blockbuster tentpole films.
Charles, I want you to look at your mirror on the wall and tell me what you think the film industry is going to look like in our near future. Is Hollywood set to dominate, or do you expect to see things fragmenting?
Well, Hollywood has been dominating, many markets for a long time, and it's going to continue making films that are going to appeal globally, and they're very good at that. What I am seeing is more powerful local markets. I mean, not just in China, but Japan, South Korea, India, and some of them, smaller markets like Thailand and Vietnam. They're coming through with really engaging films that are engaging local audiences, and to some degree, exporting those films. But that's a case by case. And certainly there are a lot of European markets who are they have very motivated governments that are trying to protect their languages, and putting policies in place that do that, combined with patriotism and local taste. And I think France would be the ultimate example of that, where French films do very well at the French box office. So I'm seeing growing confidence in local production, in the Middle East, across a number of Asian markets, and it's going to be a much more complicated jigsaw. But Hollywood's not going anywhere anytime soon, in my opinion.
Charles Gant, thank you very much. Still to come here on the agenda, Chinese cinema on the global stage. We'll speak to the producer of Living the Land, winner of a Silver Bear at this year's Berlin Film Festival. We've crunched the numbers at the global box office, but what do filmmakers themselves make of the current state of world cinema? With me now are Zhang Fan, producer of the film Living the Land, which won a Silver Bear at this year's Berlin Film Festival, and Argentinian director Santiago Esteves, whose latest, The Reborn, screened at the recent Shanghai Film Festival. Thank you both for coming on the agenda. Zhang Fan, let me start with you, because your film, Living the Land, won that Silver Bear at this year's Berlin Film Festival. Why do you think it went down so well with the jury there?
I think it's still a very exciting moment for me, even after now, maybe, let's say 5 months, I still feel super exciting. But actually, when I spoke to the juries and, the selection committee, and also many of the audiences went back then in Berlinale, during Berlinale, I think one of the most important things that they told me that they like about the film is this family bonding, strong emotion that they saw from the film, which is, making us as human beings sharing the same emotion all the time.
So that was what was happening in Europe, but Santiago, your film went to the other side of the world, being shown at the recent Shanghai Film Festival. How important is a Chinese audience for you?
Well, Argentina has a small market for films, so we are always looking for different audiences to showcase our work. So we normally focus on Europe, but this time, like the Reborn is a thriller that deals with a universal theme. So we feel it can cross different audience barriers. So we thought China would be a great place to start our world tour, and Chinese audience is still a mystery to me. So premiering the film there was a way to start to unravel that mystery.
I love it, unravelling the mystery, which sounds very much like some of the storytelling that both of you do. Zhang Fan, much of the talk in Chinese cinema this year has been the extraordinary success of Ne Zha 2. What do you think it says about the state of the industry, but also the audience?
I think Ne Zha 2 is, super, let's say, phenomenal for the Chinese film industry. And I think this phenomenon actually reaffirms that when, let's say, Chinese studios merge technological process with the culturally authenticity, the audiences will actually respond overwhelmingly, which is a very great phenomenon. And it's less about, let's say, beating the Hollywood or, but it's more about China fulfilling its own cinematic potential. That's for me, both in the creative and technological way.
Santiago, I know you said you're looking to unlock some of the mystery there, but what is your take on cinema in China?
Well, since I started going to the cinema, our main source to access Chinese cinema is European film festivals. So we only got to know the directors that succeeded in that circuit. But my feel is that in the last few years, that list of directors is increasing. So that might be a sign that the universal reach of Chinese cinema is growing nowadays.
Zhang Fan, let's talk about those tariffs that Donald Trump has been threatening on the film industry, 100% tariffs. What do you think that might do to the sector, to creativity, to innovation?
I think truly at the beginning, when we all heard about the news, it's actually a big roar inside of the whole, the Chinese industry. And I think right after that, not many days after that, the Chinese Film Bureau actually, launched policies encouraging domestic distributors to acquire more non-Hollywood titles, which actually led to a quite vibrant appearance of Chinese buyers during this year's Cannes Marché du Film, which is the market side of China. So, the Chinese distributors nowadays is trying very hard to find top films out of Hollywood and the US. And also at the same time, I think now as the summer holiday slot begun, which I witnessed myself, is that both of the films like Formula One and the Jurassic Park are actually not acting as good as they're expected. But I think, the reason could be very complex.
Santiago, cinema is very much a collaborative art. And I wonder where you see opportunities to work together with filmmakers from around the world. Is it mainly Europe? Is it China? Other places in the global south?
Well, I really hope we can work with filmmakers all around the world, and we are used to work with European producers. The Reborn, for example, is a film co-produced with Spain and Chile, and it was a great experience for me because we need to adjust different working cultures in terms of filmmaking. But at the end, I think that made the film a better film. So I'm really hopeful that in the future we could be able to collaborate more, and being in China, in Shanghai Film Festival, gave me that, increased that hope for me.
So tell us a little bit more about being at the Shanghai Film Festival, Santiago. What kind of connections did you make? What maybe surprised you?
Well, I think what surprised me the most was the youthful audience. The films were the theaters were full of Chinese young film goers. So that gave me the hope that people is going to be searching for new cinematic experiences, which for me is great because we really need that audiences to appear, and to grow.
Zhang Fan, what about those opportunities to work with filmmakers from around the world? Do you think there are enough of those opportunities to work together? And maybe what more do you think could be done to make that happen?
I think, from my very own perspective, definitely we have to keep the communication and exchanges going. So this year, also per my witness, is at the Cannes International Film Festival, China Film Association, which is a government official delegation from the Chinese film industry. For the very first time, they hosted an official panel together with Marché du Film, which actually I helped them created this panel and the agenda. So actually showcasing blockbuster directors and writers and their work and to promote the Chinese talents to the international world. But I see this just as a beginning of the Chinese film industry going back to the global stage, after this pandemic era. So I think now it's really the time to open the arms to embrace once again the global collaboration opportunities for the Chinese film industry, as we are never, and we shouldn't be, we should never be alone, isolated.
It's interesting you're talking about that blockbuster talent, and I wonder what you think, Santiago, because we're in this world of sequels, of remakes, of superhero movies. Do you think there's always going to be space for films like yours? And maybe do you think cinema operators should be making more space for them?
Well, of course, I think that path is narrowing in the last years. But at the same time, we need as filmmakers to be open and to learn more about what are the trends and what are the possibilities, the real possibilities, because it's clearly the path is narrowing, so we need to be more clever and to explore more the real possibilities of our films, and the real audiences that may become global, but we need to start working on that.
Do you agree, Zhang Fan? Do you think that the path is narrowing? And if so, why is that?
I think, as Santiago just mentioned, when he was in Shanghai, there were a lot of young generation of filmmakers audiences appeared in the theater. And actually, this is actually what's really happening to also the Chinese industry. I mean, maybe also for the future, as the younger generation is really now rising up with a more global vision. So just, for example, many of the young generation directors during the past 2 years, actually, they shot their films, although they're commercial, big blockbuster production films, they shot their films overseas. So for example, in Thailand, in Italy, and even one of them shot in Egypt. And also at the same time this year, for our festival, artistic film performances for the Chinese industry, one is Living the Land, and the other is this film of Began, the Resurrection, actually also winning at Cannes. Both of the films were productions or film works by younger generation filmmakers.
Zhang Fan, Santiago Esteves, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Remember, you can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find more agenda content on CGTN Europe's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and YouTube channels. Until next time, goodbye.
The most interesting questions.
Are there other living beings beyond Earth?
Will man or machine be in charge?
Great question.
Always have more than one answer.
Well, hold on, let me just draw up a list.
And always come from more than one person.
That's where the credibility lies.
The concept of having a machinery which is alive and evolving didn't wait for us.
The end of inequality of incomes and wealth around the world, can you imagine how difficult that is at the moment to achieve?
Every episode, Stephen Cole, Murray Beveridge, and some of the brightest minds out there shed light on the answers to some of the most intriguing questions.
There are two ways of looking at this.
Machines can't really discriminate between civilian and military targets.
The Answers Project.
Maybe we need to just look at this in a bit more detail.
Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
The Answers Project, a new podcast from CGTN Europe.